I think that's how he knew Christmas was the time to do it. Pop the question. It was the time when magic flowed through the air, when gloomy nights were lit bright with fairy lights, when giant trees came indoors, their scent of camphor and earth mingling with the sweet spice of clove-studded oranges. We had this bottle of cheap white wine and weed to smoke hanging as far out of the icy window as possible. And as we lay under the rumpled duvet in the blacklit semi-darkness, that's when he said, "I'm asking you to marry me. Will you say yes?" So hi there YouTube, and welcome to a very unexpected festive story time. Even I didn't expect to give you this, but that's the magic of creativity. Sometimes you don't know what you'll pull out of your arse next. If you didn't already hear, things came to an end. I killed the Nostalgia Project. Ish. It was less of a guillotine drop and more the falling of that velvet curtain at the close of the first act. You know it'll come back up again eventually, after a long, uncertain shuffling of seats and maybe one of those tiny little ice creams with the funny wooden spoon. There'll be a second act. You just don't know yet what it'll look like and when it'll come. Even I'm not sure. So for now, the curtain remains down, black and velvet as night. But it's December, and a dead Nostalgia Project is such a shit Christmas present. You deserve better than that, because the Nostalgia Project was the best gift you could ever have given me. You who prodded it into life in the first place, then kept it going, poking me with your encouragement sticks whenever I flagged. It was the gift that lasted all year, and here's another secret, little fetus. You didn't actually get all of it. Its appendix, its tonsils, its spleen, everything it didn't 100% need. They all got scraped out on the operating table, deemed too random, too tangential to see through to the final cut. And one of those excised organs was, well, Christmas. How perfectly timed. This phase of the year, in my experience, is either transcendent or a literal fucking hell with barely anything in between. For me, in the early 2000s and the years that followed, Christmas meant so many different things, from bliss to utter dysfunction. So here we are. I guess it's time for me to juggle satsumas for you, a brief sparkle-bedecked interpretive dance for the faithful ones who remained in their seats, beyond the ending, still waiting for that velvet curtain to rise once more and reveal whatever might leer from the shadows of the future. Right now, it's time for the ghosts of Christmas past. If you've been watching, you'll already know my exes. The ones that matter, I mean. I met them all so young, it seemed easier back then. Or maybe I just burned up all my luck in the space of 3 perfect years with 3 nearly perfect guys. But I never told you about the fact that I nearly married one of them. On Christmas, no less. No, I'm sorry. It wasn't Ash. If it was anyone, of course it should have been, but don't you remember? Ash only had the balls to ask me out by dumping his number in my fist, then fleeing like there were hellhounds on his tail. Can you ever see that boy making a grand, sweeping, surprise Christmas proposal? I can't. As for Luke, the fuckboy with the heart of gold, well, if he had have done it, proposed to me, Christ only knows, it would have been a surprise, a wild, sweeping, out of the blue, mischievously concocted madness that I would never ever forget, because everything had to be a story for Luke, a story he could tell for the rest of his life. And Christmas, I reckon it would have been way too predictable. But Matt the pitbull boy, the one who bit people's ears off in fights, who could read my private desires before they'd even bubbled into my conscious mind? Yeah. He had the guts to go big or go home, And somehow, some way, he just knew that Christmas was my perfect time. It always had been, though I would never admit to anything so corny. I still wonder why he chose it, though, Christmas. When it came to the holidays, Matt's family were dysfunctional as all hell. From his violent father to his mother growing hard and bitter with no means of escape, to the way they showed such a clear, brutal preference for his little brother Charlie. Christmases there must have been hell on earth. The minute we got together, Matt decided he was spending the holidays with my family, not his. So how did he, after a lifetime of shit Christmases, figure out that a Christmas proposal was precisely the way to do it? I guess we have to wind back the tape if it's going to make any sense. Dust off the VHS player then. Shove in that gorgeous, dusty, plastic-smelling, outdated monstrosity and hit the rewind. This is Christmas, after all, and what the fuck is that without childhood? Magic, and the days when you played and laughed and gorged yourself on chocolate coins instead of trekking miserably half-drunk round the mall, making yourself bankrupt over people you don't even fucking like. As the grainy figures on screen dance madly backwards, we're travelling all the way to the mid-1990s. My childhood Christmases were bipolar, utterly. You were either in Narnia, in heaven, or that magic cupboard broke down, locked you out, and left you rotting in suicidal despair. These two options alternated year by year. Do you get me yet? Are you a suitcase kid too, still stuck in our heart-wrenching cycle? I'm talking about custody agreements. I'm talking, I guess, about divorce. When your parents split, so do your Christmases. And maybe that's why I always, in my most private heart of hearts, dreamed about getting hitched during this magical time. It would mean that I'd emerge from the holidays with my own special person, one I could never ever be separated from. We'd keep each other safe, forever. We'd make magic, not misery, unity in the place of division, you know, all that crap that never really works out in the end, in the real world. The Christmases I loved as a kid were straight out of any pre-Wall Street crash 80s movie. Home Alone, Jingle All The Way, the Santa Claus, you know the ones, or shit, maybe you don't if you're young, but they are the classics to me because they remind me so hard of that era. Before Wall Street crashed, middle-class families were flush as fuck, moving up fast in the world, and our boomer parents were still in their 20s. They decided the minute that first baby was born that they were going to give their kids all the magic they'd never ever had in their own early youth. Growing up with frugal parents who'd survived the war, lived through rationing. For these young boomers, there was no war, no strife. They'd landed great jobs with fat pay packets, and if they weren't out blowing it all on cocaine, they'd have a house that was nearly a mansion by the age of 28, then pop out 2 or 3 kids they fully planned to give the fucking moon to. Go watch those movies after this. I'll list them below. Maybe then you'll see what I mean about all this, about the way Christmases were back then. The good ones, for me, were every bit as obscenely lavish as those films. Our parents took us down to London to stay with my wise, mischievous Granny B and her rampaging, slobbering, fabulous dogs who owned that house far more than any human resident. Then off we'd go to my aunt and uncle's vast London property, and there'd be this towering, bauble-bedecked, evergreen-smelling tree next to a crackling hearth, the pile of gifts looking like the Great Wall of China having a shimmering golden avalanche. And there'd be my 3 brothers, my 3 cousins, and all 7 of us would be running around the house hyped up on chocolate coins and stolen sips of sherry, playing with shiny new plasticky-smelling toys, or watching Henry, the haughty-faced ginger cat, cooking himself in front of the roaring fire till his fur singed. Honestly, it was like the Hogwarts common room in both looks and in vibe. The food was a full-on Great Hall feast too, this gigantic roast with all the trimmings served up for a platoon of relatives, with every kid's special preferences and fussy habits taken into account. From my smoked salmon squares to my brother's Yorkshire puddings to these gorgeous Parmesan roasted parsnips, and all of it somehow wrangled into being by one single superhuman aunt who hid her overwhelmed breakdowns in the kitchen, then emerged cool as a cucumber. Once it had been devoured, the adults pleasantly toasted, there'd be an all-afternoon game of charades, unlike any charades I've ever seen in an American movie. Our charades, it was serious shit. My stepfamily come from a pretty highbrow lineage with gold signet rings on all the boys the day they turn 18, Oxbridge education, high-ranking military officials, dinners with the Queen, every weird British person stereotype that is never really true. And when it came to charades, the rules of this game had been handed down through literal centuries, and we still play it just like this even today. Each team comes up with the name of a person, say Darwin, then has to enact a selection of other people, ranging from historical figures to Shakespearean references to the odd children's book character to keep us lot happy, whose names would spell out the letters of your chosen answer, D-A-R-W-I-N, all finished off with an overarching piece based on Darwin himself. Like I said, it was a full afternoon's game, sometimes spilling into more than a day or two. And these characters weren't simply flailed out by one person gesticulating madly at the front of the room. Where's the drama in that? We had an entire room full of props and costumes, also passed down through the years, from velvet ball gowns from the 1920s, various unwanted antiques, creepy fur scarves with foxes' heads on them, still lingering long past their era, and each character was acted out by us as a fully dressed theatre production of adults and kids. For the sake of us kids, there tended to be a lot of incidental dogs and cats wandering through these productions because I always wanted to be a dog far more than a person. I think that still applies to this day. No one really cared about winning because it was the theatrics, darling. The theatrics were what mattered. These bizarre, wonderful days rolled on, blurring together in a sea of posh chocolates and brandy-flamed Christmas puddings, gifts and more gifts and childish secrets whispered together in the corners of my cousin's huge, stunning bedrooms with cheesy movies and popcorn-munching sleepovers. And before you knew it, it was New Year's Eve, the one night a year you were allowed to stay up past midnight, which was such a mysterious time to me at that age. I still genuinely believe there'd be witches and goblins and ghosts dancing wild dances at the bottom of my garden if I was only brave enough to sneak out of bed. Those moments of linking arms and singing Auld Lang Syne as we balanced on the immense precipice of a brand new shiny year was such a surreal moment I could hardly take it in. A year was a bloody long time back then, and closing the book on one, sparking up the fresh candle of another, it made me giddy with dreams and ideas and wishes, the childish version of resolutions, I guess. The adults had lists about losing weight, advancing their careers. We had wishes about winning the lottery, swimming in the sea, snow falling in January. I'd finally fall asleep in a corner, wake miraculously back in my bed at Granny's house, a black smiley dog wagging at the foot of the bed. And that was it. One side of the coin, the side that still sparkles for me to this day. But just like any coin toss, it only fell 50-50. These blissful Hogwarts Narnia Christmases came along once every 2 years, and that felt like an eternity to me. The other ones, the Christmases in between, well, it was the curse of every suitcase kid in the world. I had to spend the best day of the year locked up, away from the rest of my family, with my dad. And honestly, it might have been okay. It might have been great if any of my brothers were full-blood brothers, but they're not. The two older are stepbrothers, belonging wholly and comfortably to that world I was perpetually ripped out of like a goddamn tumour. My younger brother has a different dad. He's the only one of us who isn't a suitcase kid. Can you imagine having one family, one place to call home? That level of stability? I fucking can't. When I was with my dad, it was like I'd abruptly, jarringly become the only child of a single parent. Like 90% of my family had been wiped out overnight by a fucking meteor, and I wasn't even allowed to be upset about it. Those Christmases were the antithesis of everything I loved about the season. Dad didn't give a shit about Christmas, let's be honest. What single guy really does? He'd do the bare essentials, but it was obvious he didn't understand what the fuss was about, even for a kid. And honestly, I think I'd have preferred it if we just didn't celebrate it at all. So I could have gone back to Mum's that evening and just had a delayed Christmas with her and my brothers. But instead, the last drop of magic was drained out of Christmas as he erected this morose-looking, bent and bedraggled plastic tree that had been suffering silently in the garage since the early 70s, blew the dust off some rumpled, fading paper wreaths like the ghost of miseries gone by, and half-assed my stocking with broken pencils and used erasers, plus whatever kids' activity set had recently fallen off the back of a wagon, irrespective of it being for 5-year-olds while I was 11 or 12. My face would be aching with fake smiles by 10 a.m, my soul shrivelling into a pitted raisin deep in my chest as I checked and rechecked the clock. But it just seemed to go backwards. It was the unfairness, above all, the isolation, the absolute raging bitterness of knowing your brothers and cousins were out there having the time of their lives with each other. No one else was this fucking alone. Dead-eyed, dead-souled, I'd be stuffed into a flouncing girly dress that made me itch to the marrows of my bones with gender dysphoria, not that I knew that was the issue yet, and off I'd be hauled to an old people's home to sit with an endless array of stranger relatives who'd all insist on sloppily kissing me, their yellowed false teeth grinding inside their mouths as sticky saliva caked my cheeks, and that was it, all day long. Not even a book to read, let alone toys to play with. I don't even understand it. I had cousins on my dad's side too, cousins I adore. If we could just have spent the day with them, it would have been fantastic. But Dad was, in many ways, a Victorian father. Children were miniature adults who had to suck it up like everyone else. They should be seen and not heard, displayed like dolls with the adults, told it was rude to read a book or play while the grown-ups were talking. So I just had to sit there, like a mannequin, wholly alone in a crowd of strangers, the only child, listening to the clock tick, tick, ticking away, the magic of Christmas massacred around me, all the while knowing that all over the fucking country, every single kid besides me, or so it felt, was having the best day of the entire year, and my day, my chance, wouldn't come along until I was a whole nother year older. What got me through, in truth, was drugs, even when I was just a kid. I wasn't taking them yet, but I was damn well daydreaming about it, always at my dad's place and especially at Christmas. The minute I first read about drugs, about the fact they took you out of yourself, your body left obediently in place as per custody agreement, but your mind, your soul would be shielded, floating away in bliss. Drugs felt like my solution. As I got older, though, I came to realise that drugs weren't that vital ingredient when it came to surviving Christmas, though, let's be real, they kind of helped. I mean, the adults seemed to break out the booze at 10 o'clock in the morning on Christmas Day. No one seems quite able to survive Christmas sober. But the main thing you needed in this dysfunctional, bloody world when it came to surviving Christmas was, as cheesy as it sounds, friends. As soon as I met Ash, our new Christmas routine was born. every single year since I met him, me, Ash, and Jack would meet up in the days before Christmas to get prodigiously stoned, curled up snug in a companionable haze of weed smoke, watching weird movies or even weirder porn, playing Grand Theft Auto or some car racing game that Jack would never ever admit to losing. He was the worst loser in the world. It became a running joke between me and Ash, the way he'd blame the faulty joystick or the shit car or the fact he was obviously more stoned than anyone else in the room. There was no talking him out of it. The boys would get the munchies, pig out on chorizo and chocolate and Doritos. Then we'd chat shit all night and pass out, stumbling down in the morning to hear the of the water bong. Jack getting started on his traditional wake and bake as he steeled himself to head home and face the looming festivities. One by one, we'd fall out into the cold winter sunlight, then sail serenely back to our parents' places for Christmas, our holiday survival batteries fully topped up by a night of companionship, understanding, and obscurely shared references and in-jokes, always with the knowledge that the others were just a text away if family time got too much. Honestly, mobile phones and friends on the other end, they are the real saviours of Christmas, far more than any drug could ever be. So, hi, if you're watching this hiding in the bathroom with your phone from the whole of your family, which is kind of what I tend to spend some of Christmas doing. So if that's you. Even after Ash's life went askew, as the violently abusive Nia moved in with him, then barred me from his life, well, we still snuck in our Christmas get-togethers. Nia was German. She'd literally moved continents to be with Ash after only knowing him for 3 flipping weeks. Like that isn't the red flag from hell, but you know how the Germans are about Christmas. They do it better than anyone on earth. And there was no way she was staying here for the holidays, so off she'd pop home for the week, and the very second her plane lifted off, Ash would be on the phone inviting me over. For 8 years, we snuck around behind her back, never having sex, never doing anything naughty, just literally being friends, but we still had to sneak it behind her back, barely seeing each other bar that perfect Christmas week, the one and only time Ash got to be his old self again. And one year, when I woke up on his spare mattress, the world outside had turned pure, sparkling white, heaped in 3 feet of snow and growing by the second. It turned out to be the best Christmas hangout we ever had. The snow kept me there for 2 more days. We walked around the snowy, iced-over canals, breath steaming in the crystalline air, sending snowballs skittering across the ice, poking at the shopping trolleys and foul-looking detritus that had drifted up and been trapped in the frozen canal surface. Our evenings were spent sharing spiced rum and coke and ignoring movies the way we always did when we were together, because we'd just rather be talking. The conversation flowed with Ash always as we sparked up more weed, and in the depths of those warm, smoky midnights, snow sparkling beyond the darkened window, it was like the Christmas magic had rewound the clocks to a better time, to the days before Nia, when Ash was still his own man with his own dreams. I was forever grateful for that stunning, unexpected snowfall. There wouldn't be many times like that left between Ash and me, not before the abuse rotted the soul right out of him. Fuck. I told you we weren't here to talk about Ash, and somehow here he is. His life ran through mine like a major artery for half my life. There are so few stories that aren't slightly sprinkled with his magic. But the actual story, we're getting there. It's about Matt and that proposal, that future that I could be rotting away in right now. He was a real reader of people, Matt, perceptive to an eerie degree, perhaps some throwback psychic genes swirling in his Romany blood. I think that's how he knew Christmas was the time to do it. Pop the question. I'd certainly never spoken to him about it, the way I'd always envisaged Christmas being the time for romance. But it was. It was the time when magic flowed through the air, when gloomy nights were lit bright with fairy lights, When giant trees came indoors, their scent of camphor and earth mingling with the sweet spice of clove-studded oranges. Maybe it even flowed through my veins, the romance of Christmas, as cheesy as that sounds. My mum got married just beforehand, not just once, but twice. Both husbands. The first time was a quiet restaurant, decked out in lights and candles, seemingly just for them. Then they jetted off to New York to see the Christmas trees, the whole city bustling and glittering and freezing fucking cold. The second time she got her proper white wedding, me in pink satin living out my princess fantasies, a little Snow White teddy bear stuck to my wreath of pink and white flowers, and our house packed with friends and family till my eldest brother, who was 15 now, moved the TV upstairs, stole a bottle of liquor, and got us all drunk. After which I ran round the house like a savage, showing everyone how well I could climb the door frames, and somehow I still never got diagnosed with ADHD. 5 minutes later, we were back in London, where the magic of Christmas unfurled like it always did. So, of course, Christmas and romance are irrevocably intertwined for me. And when I think of Matt, I always think of winter. Was his area not just rough as all hell, but also 10 degrees colder than the rest of the Midlands? Maybe so. Or maybe it had to do with the reckless amount of speed we were taking. I could never sleep, so those iced-over December mornings sparkled outside his window, and the only heating at Matt's place was the electric fire in the living room. So as soon as his family had left in the morning for their garage, we'd go down and spark up the cosy little fire. Then Matt would do us this perfect fry-up and we'd have a cigarette each, both of which were indulgences I never allowed myself at home. Cigarettes were for the weekend and fried food was for never. But around Matt, there was no saying no to any vice. It was like a cozy port in the ice storms of the outside world, those mornings with him. Matt managed to bribe all of his Christmas presents out of my hands before Christmas Eve was even out. Like I said, you just couldn't say no to him about almost anything. How the fuck do you think he got my new rocks, the ones he never ever gave back? Christmas was chaotic, but when the day was over, we were back at his place, playing with the black light I'd bought him, hooking up the MP3 player he'd got me to my new iDog speaker, then watching the little black and white robo-puppy gyrating and flapping its ears and flashing its lights joyously as we taught it to enjoy future pop above all else. We had this bottle of cheap white wine and weed to smoke hanging as far out of the icy window as possible, and as we lay under the rumpled duvet in the blacklit semi-darkness, that's when he said, "Next Christmas," with that irresistible cheeky grin, his teeth glowing faintly in the violet dark. "Next Christmas, if we're still together, and you know we will be, I'm asking you to marry me. Will you say yes? Would you?" And I just curled up in his chest and said, "Yeah, I reckon I will." And that was that. Our future wasn't a foggy, unlit highway anymore, no one knowing what the other wanted. The mist had been sliced back, and now the way ahead was clear, bright. We lay in silence, imagining that future, or, well, maybe that's a lie. I wasn't imagining the future with Matt, because I must have known somewhere in my heart of hearts that a future with him would, in all truth, be abysmal. He already owed me about 200 quid, couldn't be asked holding down a job despite having work available any damn day. He refused to wear a condom ever, resulting in one kid with an ex already, which he paid zero child support for since she'd refused to abort it, thereby taking on all responsibility in his eyes. That was Matt. Who the hell knowingly ties themselves down to someone like that at just 21 years old? But Christ, it's like I said, Matt was shrewd, perceptive, and out for anything he could get. He must have known that he was terrible on paper, but more than capable of dancing through life on pure good looks and charm. And he'd just discovered that my whole family were blinded stupid by the sentimentality of Christmas. At that point, I reckon, he'd looked into my mind and seen the way a million Christmas movies and the inherited memories of my mother and the lavish weddings of my cousins had all swirled together into this big half-baked fantasy of going home on Christmas Day and making the big announcement, a wedding in the new year, a vintage emerald-flanked diamond sparkling on my finger, and the way the warmth of Christmas magic would linger on into the new year, into our new lives together. That's what I was thinking about, I reckon. All that corny shit. Matt, though, fuck only knows what was playing out in his head. I still remember all these conversations he used to have with other blokes at nightclubs. When they were high, they'd hold themselves up in a corner somewhere and pat each other on the back for hours about what good blokes they were, making up all these mad fictional scenarios to prove their good blokiness. So, did Matt really believe that? Did he genuinely see himself as a basically good person who'd been shat on by life but was doing the best they could? Or was he fully aware from the word go that he'd latched onto me because I had a stable income, was a bit of a pushover, and was willing to share what I earned maybe forever so he could carry on sitting on his arse? Even now, I have no idea. None. So I just carried that sentimental fantasy around inside my head for days, weeks, well into the new year, until, like the cheap trinket it always had been, it began to tarnish. It began to rust. Soon it felt more like manacles than diamonds. If I don't end this, I'd find myself thinking, before next Christmas, I'm going to be stuck in this forever. You know the craziest thing? I don't even remember how Matt and I broke up. Not the first time. We fought so much, it all just blurred into one big mess. I do remember being at his house and him being upset, crying even, after I'd broken it off. I wanted to get the fuck out, be gone, as you do. It was like this immense weight had lifted off my shoulders, but he told me to stay, just for a little while. So I did, because I was a pushover. And after that while was up, well, I'd had a glass of wine. And Matt said I was over the limit. There was no way he was letting me drive home tonight. What choice did I have? I had to stay over. And by morning, he'd gone on and on and on about how much he was going to change and how much he loved me, until I'd been pressured into giving him a second chance. It didn't feel good. But like I said, there was no saying no to Matt. We only made it another week, though. Maybe 2 before the afternoon he came round to my work. I already told you that bit. Matt showing off his new shoes, sunglasses, t-shirt, all this stuff he'd bought without paying back a penny of what he owed me. Yeah. Well, he could tell I wasn't fucking amused, and maybe he knew why. Maybe he knew damn well why. And as much as he wanted me back, it was never going to be on my terms. So he needed to test the waters. Was I still under his spell? Could I still be bullshat? So he asked me 2 questions. That's all he needed. Matt, the great reader of people. Do you still love me? He asked. It wasn't an uncommon question. His need for affection, reassurance, it could be exhausting. Yes, I said, of course. Are you still in love with me? I'd never even thought about it. I'd never even realised. Because the thing was, I didn't even have to think about it. Just the same as it did with Luke, it just popped right out. No. How long for? He demanded. How long since you fell out of love with me? I don't even know. I didn't even know I had till you asked me. And that was it. I'd finally broken the spell, said the magic fucking words, found a way to say no to Matt. If I wasn't in love with him, I couldn't be wrapped around his little finger, and without that, what use was I to him? He stormed out, then sent me a text 45 minutes later, telling me it would have been my fault if he died today, because he'd just driven all the way home at 120 miles per hour. I doubt it was even a lie, but pretending it was a death-defying suicidal move was a bit ridiculous. Matt was a stock car racer and he never stopped driving like it. If anyone stood a chance of taking Spaghetti Junction at that speed, it was him. Dick move regardless. Be careful what you wish for, Matt, what you push for. When someone breaks up with you and you force your way back in, you're never really in, are you? Look into their eyes and you'll see it. Turn a relationship into a cage and they'll only come to resent you. But like every addict ever, Matt wanted to ride our oxytocin love train till the magic was trampled dead into the ground. I did bump into him though, that next Christmas. You know, the one we were going to get engaged on. We ran into each other at the Christmas market in the city. All our friends were there, the lights glittering, then blurring with amaretto shot mulled wine, little stalls like snow-topped cabins, everything sparkling with candles and fairy lights. We rode galloping horses and jolly reindeer atop the merry-go-round, then went for a drink with the others. He told me how much he'd missed me, and I'd missed him too, in a way. It was always good to see Matt, no matter what. He was just so easy to be around and never ever boring. But I wonder if he wondered that night, you know, about everything we'd said we were going to do this Christmas. Now, do you reckon he actually would have done it? Gone to work for a month or 3 to buy me a ring? Or is it more likely that Matt would have surfed in on the fast train of, you should choose it yourself, make it really special, make it exactly what you want, which is a great fucking train, unless it segs into, I'm a bit short right now, so you just cover it and I'll pay you back someday, I promise. Like, I'll pay you back if you ever really need it. Or worse still, hey, Dorian's parents, could you help me out a bit? Like maybe 110% of the price of the ring? Yeah, I could see that one happening. And I can see my mum being enough of a romance sucker to fall for it, 110% and all. These days, I don't even wonder. It's 14 years later now, and if I'd stayed with Matt, we'd undoubtedly have a kid of precisely that age, given his condom dodging and my forgetfulness with the pill. Combine that with his refusal to work and my desire never to have children ever, but what can you do when you can't say no to Matt? And we would be trapped, kid following kid. Both of us had ADHD, so the kids doubtless would. And like I said, I never even wanted any. Can you imagine the racket, the chaos, and ultimately the burning fucking resentment? Of all my exes, Matt is the one I never, ever wonder about. With Ash, with Luke, there could have been a future. A good one, possibly. With Matt, our future came this close to coming true. And all I was blinded by his pretty face and fast-talking bullshit. Thank God I wasn't, in the end, blinded by Christmas too. Even if, I suspect, the only diamond ring I will ever come home wearing now is one I bought myself. Maybe a ring sparkles brighter when it isn't attached to those heavy promises, though, and manacles of paperwork, all the distasteful divorce statistics drowned out by deafening church bells. Maybe a diamond should just be a diamond. And maybe Christmas is best spent stoned with good friends instead of waiting for some perfect fantasy ending. So eat, drink, and be merry. If you've got kids, live the magic through them. If you haven't, find new magic in whatever shape it comes. It could be a video chat with an online friend far, far away over hot mulled wine or decent weed. It could be a long, sparkling winter walk with your dog on Christmas morning. The transition from childhood days when the magic is all around and everyone else brews it for you into adult Christmases where the only magic you'll damn well find is the magic you summon yourself. It's a harsh journey, and for a time, for most of us, the magic does die. But I promise it'll be back. So long as you don't go forcibly reviving it through somebody like Matt. If I drank champagne, I would now raise it to the fact that I am not presently sobbing into my gin as I regard the pile of unpaid bills Matt just dumped in my lap, meaning at best our clutch of accidental sprogs are not going to get any presents this year, and at worst we're going to be homeless. In another version of that parallel universe, I could be pissing on a stick to discover I'm pregnant for the 4th fucking time because he still won't wear a fucking condom. And by now, the magic of going home with that big announcement has worn itself completely threadbare. In a still darker version, I'm dead as a dodo and Matt's got a pacemaker at the age of 36. And maybe that one's the likeliest of all, given the amount of speed we were shooting up back then. However you spin it, it's not a pretty picture. So back in the here and now, the sugar plum fairy tumbles off our stage directly onto her arse, landing atop the unsuspecting trombonist, whose instrument lets out a booming off-key fart, rudely shattering the hushed chatter of the auditorium. Ladies and gentlemen, your festive interlude is now over, and what waits behind the velvet curtain is yet to be seen. It ripples that rich black velvet, though no breeze is present, seeming to form at times the surreal outlines of tortured faces, fleeting spectres and things half-formed, things dreamed of but not yet born. Then they're gone, vanishing with the wind that isn't really there. The ghosts of Christmas past fade back into the ether, but behind that curtain, something is coming. And that is the end of this rather long Christmas waffle. There were bits of the Nostalgia Project that I hacked out for being too tangential and too waffly and too random, and quite a lot of them turned out to be Christmas. And I thought, dude, it's December and you've taken the Nostalgia Project away at Christmas time and you've given nobody a Christmas present. So stitch together the Christmassy bits and make a bit of a Christmas nostalgia thing to give people. Because I do really love Christmas. I certainly loved it growing up. And I do still love it now. This December has been kind of crazy and not so good, but Christmas is still ahead of me, and I'm hoping it's going to be a lovely one. So happy Christmas to you, wherever you are, and whenever I manage to get this video edited and uploaded. Yes, if you are hiding away in the bathroom watching this on your phone, escaping from your family or friends or whoever you're spending Christmas with, or possibly just you maybe couldn't get around to see them because of lockdown restrictions or whatever else, if you're on your own this Christmas, then happy Christmas. And I hope this was a long waffle that kept you reasonably happy. I tend to escape Christmas quite early. I'm not much of a one for dealing with the family thing for like the whole of Christmas. I don't have that kind of stamina these days. I really don't. But I love that I have the choice with my family, and I think that's something we kind of all need to treasure, especially at the moment with the world being such a dangerous place. You just don't know what could happen and when people could be taken away, and you don't know when things are going to change. And bits of this story I had to re-record because they made me so emotional just mentioning family members who aren't around anymore. And I was like, that is a random place to start crying in the middle of this story. Like, cut that out. That makes no sense to anyone. But no, it was weird going back and revisiting things. So you don't know when things are going to change. So appreciate all your Christmases. So happy Christmas and Happy New Year too. I'm going to have a fairly quiet one, I think, with some streaming things. I don't trust going out New Year's Eve at the moment with everything going on in the world. I don't trust it. To be honest, I don't like busy New Year's Eves anyway, so New Year's Eve in a club has never been my favourite place to be. I actually had a really good one last year, just listening to stream stuff and vlogging and having a nice time at home. I actually really enjoyed myself, so fingers crossed for a repeat of that this New Year's Eve. And with all of that said, I'm going to go away. So thank you for listening. Over and out. Happy Christmas. Bye.